Hello, everyone. This is Lupe Munoz.
And this is Steve McKeon. And we've got some exciting news today on the Leadership Exchange. Lupe, you want to tell our guests what they're in for?
Yeah. They're in for a special treat. We spoke about this at the end of season 3, that we were going to add team member to this podcast discussion. This, to me, is a very natural evolution for us, having someone that we also would have a lot of discussions with. Steve and Alex often find ourselves in conversations on the phone, in person. Conversations about leadership usually is where it ends up going. Sometimes maybe about the Dallas Cowboys, but most of the time about... Okay. All right, Alex. Okay, I know you're not a big fan. I get it. This is Alex Aranda. She will be joining us at the Leadership Exchange now, moving forward. We're super excited. We think she's going to add another dimension to this discussion and really help us with adding some levity to the discussions, which is something we've been really working on. With that said, Alex, please tell our listeners about yourself and some of the cool things you do.
Yeah, well, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Lupe. I'm excited to be a part of the Leadership Exchange on a more regular basis. I will share that, like you two, very like-minded in terms of how we think about teams, how we are focused and dedicated to empowering and uplifting the next generation of leaders. I feel really passionate about this work, and I'm really excited just to be a part of this podcast. So excited to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
And you're from Oakland, right?
Of course. I'm from Oakland, born and raised. And so when you said your joke there about the Dallas Cowboys, yeah, no, that doesn't sit very well with me.
Because she's a Denver Bronco fan, and she was like hidden inside that Raider Nation for years.
No.
Alex, hey, wait. Before, I know this is off topic a little bit, but
yeah.
Okay, so what, are you a Niners fan, or are you a Raiders fan? The Las Vegas Raiders, by the way.
No, I feel like that would be just treasonous. Growing up in Oakland, everyone that I knew, my family, friends, you had to root for the Oakland Raiders. Let me tell you really quick. It's interesting because obviously I don't live in Oakland anymore, but we just you feel connected, right? And now that the team has moved on to Las Vegas, it still feels like the Oakland Raiders in some way, shape, or form, although I know it's no longer Oakland Raiders. So needless to say, my son, who is 8, as he starts to get involved in sports, and especially leading up to the Super Bowl, he tells me that he wants to wear a jersey for the LA Rams. And I was like, what?
Good for him.
Where did that come from? And I had to quickly tell him. I said, "Son, don't say that out. Don't say that around your aunts and your uncle."
Alex, yeah. I'm more than happy to get him a proper jersey from the Denver Broncos. I've got a couple that I can send your way.
Yeah.
All right, now that we got our NFL alliances out of the way there.
Yeah.
Broncos.
Okay, Alex, seeing as you're the new host, first of all, start off with the story, and then tell us what topic you want to talk about based on that story, and then we can explore that a little bit.
Well, thanks for the honor. I've been thinking about this, and one topic that I think would be beneficial for the listeners out there would be this idea of influence without authority. So how do you build influence in a space where You want people to do what you need them to do. You want them to, behave in a certain way, but there's no direct reporting line. And I feel like this could apply in many functions, not just operations, maybe not just in HR or even from like an environmental health and safety perspective. Influence without authority. What brought me to this was I was reflecting on a meeting that I had, an interaction. It was one of my very first interactions with a frontline leader going back a few years ago, and it stands out with me for till this day. I was there on one of my initial visits, and I can't tell you how it caught me off guard. He says to me in so many words, Alex, I see management show up all the time. And it's often that they'll come in and they'll point things out that are wrong, that need to be fixed. They make these promises about what they want to improve, but then they kind of go away. Why this stuck out to me was clearly the leader had been disappointed from time to time in others. And I didn't want to fall into that same issue, right? I didn't want to have that same start with this person. And so, still to the day, it stands out to me as one of those moments where I was like, nope, I could see the disappointment. I'm not going to do that. And it shaped the way I continue to interact with him and with others. That's something that stands out to me.
Great story, Alex. When we think about influence without authority, we looked at some competencies in that space. And so credibility, right? So that is a great example of credibility, showing up when you say you're going to be there, and the importance.
Before we go down that road, Steve, how would you guys define influence? Just so we can level set before we go into things.
How would you define it, Lupe?
Oh, dude, why are you throwing questions back at me? Okay, here's a stab. Influence is versus like authority, right? Without authority. With authority, you get by title, by position. Mm-hmm. If I'm your boss, for example, I have authority over you, which means I have the ability to coach you, to document performance management issues. If I'm not liking something, the way you're doing something, that's the type of authority. I have the authority to influence your pay rate, your salary with annual promotion, whatever that cycle is. So that's what authority is. And I think influence is what you earn. So influence has to be earned, and that's through the relationship you have with someone, the way you interact with them, the way you treat them, the way you follow through. Alex, your great story about, hey, I wanted to be the type of person that delivers on their commitments and not fall into that trap. And by doing that, I'm guessing you had influence over that in person. And the influence is really around, hey, there's something I need done as a leader or as a safety specialist, environment, you name it, HR. And people are going to help me accomplish that because of the person I am and the things I do for them and the relationships we have. So that's how I would define influence.
I agree 100%, Lupe. And I guess the avenue I was going to go down was kind of get to that same space, starting off with a little bit of the caveat of to affect those decisions, those behaviors, those outcomes, as Alex was talking about it in that story, really built around your credibility, mutual benefit, the trust, the relationship, the initiative, all different areas that, frankly, a lot of people aren't comfortable in performing or really feeling that they're empowered to participate in that way. So I think that's a big opportunity for anybody that doesn't have direct reports that needs to influence the behaviors, to influence some change in an organization. And this is really something that we've heard recently, some feedback after some training where the audience came forward and just said, wow, this was something that I really wasn't sure what I was going to learn, but I've learned so much in this understanding of these kind of key areas that I can think about as I'm trying to influence people in my sphere, in my organization per se.
And I think tying it back to the story I gave earlier, when I was thinking about a topic for the listeners, influence without authority came up because it felt like we talk about, well, and as leaders, it's easy to tell up and coming leaders, well, you need to learn how to influence. And so there's a lot of questions about like, okay, that sounds easy. It sounds good, but what do you have to do? Like, what does that specifically look like? It had got me to thinking about what are some of those tactics that new leaders can leverage in their careers as they start a new role, as they're working with a new team. And I'll tell you that it brought me to this moment where I was a new early career leader. I had been hired to move from California to Iowa to support a meat processing facility. And I remember walking into the door there on my first day. I knew no one. And I was coming from a different industry altogether. I felt like, boy, it's a giant mountain to climb, trying to really engage, trying to get to a point to where I might be able to help the team, but they had to want to take some help from me. It was from that type of experience and from others, right, that some of the tactics that I hope to be able to share really came from. That was just, another piece of it and why I felt like influence without authority. There's some things we might be able to share with early leaders to help them in their journey.
That's a great example. So you came into this organization with not a lot of direct reports, but you were brought in to bring, some kind of service and probably some change. So what was the first activity that you remember that was kind of that breakthrough moment for you in that new role?
The specifics of it, it's been far too long to probably recall, but I'll tell you that what made the difference was in moments where I showed up, I made it a point to listen first. I was relatable to someone and just help solve a problem. And it was through moments like that as I continued to show up that you start to build some equity with the team, and influence was a natural outcome from those interactions.
Oh, that's great.
One of the things that you said, Alex, or somebody said that I wanted to clarify, because I know that's not necessarily what you meant, or I don't know what you meant, but there was the discussion around.
Are you putting words in my mouth, Lupe?
I don't know. Sorry, I'm not trying to. You said something about like, hey, if you're let's say you're part of a supporting organization, you don't have any authority over a group of people, let's say other departments, and you're trying to get them to support your project or whatever it is that you're trying to get accomplished. And that is very valuable, of course. But I wanted to point out that if you have direct reports that you do have authority over, you do not want to leverage that authority every chance you get to lead your people, right? You need to do the same. You need to do the same thing with them and approach it as, hey, I don't want to have authority and use that to lead this group. I want to influence them.
Yeah.
The moment you say something like, well, I'm the boss, so this is the way it's going to go. In my opinion, you've failed. I mean, like, you're, as a leader, you went back to the, well, because I told you so, right? And to me, that's a terrible direction to go. I'm not saying you don't have to sometimes do that. It's rare, but some people do that like all the time. And I think that's very destructive.
Yeah, Lupe, that's a good call out, and thanks for bringing that up. In fact, I was thinking about a very situation like that, where in a room with what is a very seasoned leader, air quotes for the listeners, it was almost verbatim what you shared, right? This is a setting where, we're supposed to be collaborating. everyone's input is meaningful, or at least that was the setting that was set up. And then bottom line, the leader says, yeah, well, thanks, but I'm the boss and I'm going to make a different decision. In my mind, and I'm sure it was going through the minds of others, it was like, well, then why did we just spend the last hour or so talking about this topic if you're just going to go and do whatever you want anyways?
Yeah, exactly. Steve, what are the top 4 things you think touch on influence without authority? And then we'll kind of pick that apart, right?
In no specific order, but the relationship that we were just talking about, whether you have direct reports or not, you've got to establish that relationship with people. And if you do that, you start to build trust, deep respect, empathy. And that's such an important first stage. Credibility comes next. If you say you're going to do something and follow through with it. And if you can't get it done, you need to be transparent and let the team know, especially when you're a cross-functional partner in one of these spaces. Initiatives, Alex had touched on, just stepping in first, courage to move through maybe an area that you're not comfortable with. And then the other thing that we've all been touching on here is just that service, right? You're there to sometimes make it better first for other people in order to help build on maybe some change in direction that you need to help an organization move towards, right? And so if you can clear some of those obstacles early on, build that credibility, relational capacity with those folks, good things will happen. So yeah, credibility, relationship, initiative, service, kind of the 4 that jump out at me.
For service, you're sort of, I think you're kind of touching on servant leadership. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's, again, whether you have direct reports or not, you can be a servant leader to an organization.
Absolutely.
Or a group of individuals that you're helping advance a cause. And I think that's just something that, is important for any leader. And this topic specifically, authority without influence, implies that you have no influence whatsoever. But I think the one thing that we've all recognized, you have presence, right? And if you intentionally put your presence in a space where you can be part of those conversations, you can start to get integrated into the organization. I think, Alex, the meat packing facility is a great example. Anytime we've all entered a new organization, you have to go through that learning curve, but putting yourself out there, right? Getting into those organizations quickly, I think is really important.
And to that point, I feel like when you're the person trying to build the influence, you have to be willing to take that first step. I always think about this requires generosity, right? Being willing to give a little bit at the front end. And what you do with that is you allow to start building some equity in people with groups. And oftentimes I see new leaders go, and this is where they can get stuck, is their first thing out of their mouth is, hey, I need you to do this for me.
Yeah.
But if the reason that you're there is to, hey, let me help you with this, that dynamic starts to change.
Yeah, it sets a tone in a very different way, right?
Exactly.
The first tone, hey, you're here for me. The other approach, hey, I'm here for you. You're already kind of laying the foundation of what the relationship will look like. So
yeah. And Lupe, I mean, in that same kind of space, things that you do well in your approach is leveraging questions, right? As you seek to understand, maybe kind of walk through that a little bit. What's types of questions? What's important about maybe starting with questions before, maybe making assumptions?
I'm going to connect the two, or connect that behavior approach to both credibility and relationships. You mentioned the 4: credibility, relationships, initiative, and service. It actually maybe even touches on service too, because there's a servant leader aspect to it. I love to have one-on-ones with teams And I love to have group, like I like to speak to groups when I first meet the team. So I'll speak to the group of leaders separately, and then I'll speak to everybody on the teams that I'm newly part of, and then I'll speak to every single person one-on-one. And the whole intention there for me is obviously to get to know people, understand them, get to know about them more than just, hey, they work for the team and they're a number, if you will, right? They're a lot more than that. And the way I can demonstrate that is to take the time to get to know them. I will talk to them, but I think it touches on credibility, which normally you wouldn't think that, but it touches on credibility and the credibility of my intention behind the way I'm going to lead people. And if I'm listening to you, and I have some prepared questions that I like to at least, at a minimum, we talk about more. But one of them is, what would you like to change if you could change one thing about the team or the work environment, et cetera? And that leads to a lot of really great opportunities for improvement, especially if I start to see a theme across several team members. Then I'm like, that's the thing I need to go after, because if I can do that, then I will demonstrate my credibility as a leader, because my intention is being shown that I really want to make things better for the team, along obviously with the bit for the business. But I can't get to the business piece until I can really sort of, I guess, win the minds and hearts of the team. And it starts with the sort of that exercise for me. And then I have to do what Alex said, is when they say, hey, this is an opportunity. And if I open my mouth and say, you know what, we're going to go after that, then I really, really have to be able to go after that and demonstrate that I went after it, because otherwise it works actually against you to commit to something and not be able to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, Lupe. And I know it also helps when you get to know people in that space before you start your common practice of group hugs, where if you don't have that relationship with people.
Hey, we laugh, but you laugh, but it's a real thing, right? And it's amazing. But no, so let me explain. Let's explain to everybody. Like, Lupe's just joined the team and start hugging everybody. You get to a really good place in work relationships, and there might be some HR people cringing about this, but to me, that's a skeptic view of the world. But it truly teams that form that bond, like grown men, mechanics, technicians, leaders, supervisors, different teams, giving themselves that I'm going to describe as manly hug, right? The handshake and one arm behind each other, giving each other hugs. That demonstrates exactly the type of relationship that the group has with each other, and the amount of respect and commitment that they have to that team. So if you're thinking of like, I belong to a group, right? That's the kind of belonging that people yearn for, I think, in the world in general, but just as much at work as anywhere else.
Speaks to that relationship piece, Luke. And kind of where we started that conversation is getting to know people, asking those open-ended questions, I think really helps. I mean, my experience has been that you can learn so much about another person, kind of that adage, walk in somebody else's shoes, really makes a difference to know where other people are coming from, and starts to build that relationship, because now you've got a little bit more insight on the individual. I think in the other side of that, though, is you got to be willing to share in your own story, right? And that's another thing, is you're building influence. You got to be vulnerable. You got to open up a little bit to gain that trust, the empathy that you'll need from others at times as they see you're struggling to work through something. The nice thing working with you two is that, we're able to share openly a lot of times in that space, and really helped us when we've been bogged down. And so I just think in that relationship piece that you were talking about, Lupe, is also just, building that framework, that network of trust amongst some peers as well, so that if Alex isn't there, she should feel that I'm going to ask the same questions that she would, and vice versa. So I think it just really kind of tying all those together, and understanding that the relationship building credibility, nothing's more powerful when a team hears another leader speaking very similar in terms of, where we're going as an organization. And again, that influence comes a lot of times without authority, but it's being present, having the courage to kind of step in and lead and, make any corrections as well.
And to that point, one thing, and I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here, but I share this because I've heard it, and I think, maybe you two have heard it at times through your career, is the watch out is when you do have certain relationships, resist the temptation to name drop or to say like, hey, well, I talked to this person and they love this idea, like they support it, because then that now you by title, that person may not have like the weight, but when you're bringing in a third person who maybe does come with certain authority in an organization to say, all right, well, they're on board, you're not going to get influence. You're basically getting the compliance of like, all right, well, I think you already laid it out that this is what is going to happen.
Yeah, you're leveraging somebody else's. You're leveraging somebody else's authority. Really, what you're doing by name dropping like that, right?
There you go. But I've heard that.
Yeah,
way too
I
often.
hate it. It really annoys me when somebody name drops like that. It's just kind of like makes my left eye twitch and like. But you're right. I mean, it's not. I would love for one of you to, if you can, expand a little bit on credibility, because initially when I heard credibility, but I knew it wasn't the case because Steve's pretty good about this stuff. But I was like, wait, credibility? Are you talking about like doing your job? Like if I'm a retail sales leader, is credibility around my knowledge of retail sales? Or if I'm an engineer leading engineers, is my credibility around I'm the best engineer on the team? What exactly? Credibility could mean a lot of different things. So from what perspective, I'd love for us to talk about from what perspective, because I did talk a little bit about the perspective of credibility as a leader and my intentions behind what I'm trying to accomplish. But I think there's other dimensions to that.
That's the actions, right? The words and the actions. But you're right, Lupe. I think it starts with the competence that we all have technical knowledge, but it goes beyond that. And I think, what you just touched on is the consistency between like our words and actions. We're going to do what we say we're going to do. But I think there's another piece, and that other piece is just showing up where the work happens, right? You can't be one of those leaders that is wanting to build influence from the comfort of a desk and in your office. Being present wherever the work is happening, I think you need those three elements to really build credibility.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and I think the competence piece too, Alex, in how you demonstrate competence is really important, because you could be a know-it-all, show-off, very competent person, which is really going to turn people off. So kind of knowing that, how that piece is important to understand is, I think, really key in how you demonstrate your competence. And then the other side of that is, willingness to share that knowledge, right? So a lot of times people that sometimes will have that high level of competency in a super technical field, maybe aren't going to want to share that because then somebody else knows it, right? And you start to kill the credibility piece, Lupe, I think that you were talking about as well. If you're just not going to be open to share some of that knowledge that you do have as subject matter expert or whatever it is that you are expert at. So I think, that builds credibility as well. So not only are you able to demonstrate, but you're able to share, you're able to build other team members' knowledge in that space.
The other thing to keep in mind, like there are exceptions to this, right? If I'm leading a team of NASA engineers, there's probably some engineering background, technical science background I probably need to have for that team to maybe respect me. and see that I have credibility in that area. If I'm leading a surgical team, probably, right? If I'm leading a team for the CDC. So a lot of those types of situations, I'm sure there are. But one of the things a mistake that commonly happens is, oh, this person is from another manufacturing industry. They can't possibly lead a team on our manufacturing industry. And so that mindset that, well, if you didn't learn from our particular industry, then you couldn't possibly lead people. And I don't agree with that, because if I was given opportunities for jobs that only I knew, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. When I first became a maintenance manager, a maintenance and engineering manager, I'd never led maintenance teams. I was never a mechanic per se. The key to me is you got to be the type of leader that can join a team, not be the know-it-all, like Alex says, like you can't go in there being the know-it-all. Be humble, learn, because you can learn most things. Not everything, unless you have like 8 years to put into like being a doctor, right? But for the most part, you can learn what a business is doing and an industry. But in the meantime, you rely on the people around you, right? They're the technical experts, the ones that do the work. If you're that type of leader that wants to tell and micromanage people, yeah, you're going to fail because you don't have that knowledge. It frustrates me because people get into that mindset, well, they're not a good candidate for this leadership role because they've not been in manufacturing, or they've not been in this industry or that industry. And I'm like, hey, the industry that we are in as leaders is people.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me of a story when I was working in defense contracting, and I was asked to go help out in a repair center where they were taking some battle damaged vehicles and having to get those back into operational condition. And, my first week there, one of the senior mechanics comes up and he wants to know why I got this assignment, right? Like, why am I there to lead this effort? And explain to him, well, I'm not really here to lead the effort. I'm here to kind of understand what's going on and see if I might be able to help. And his first question was, have you ever rebuilt a Humvee before? No. Have you ever driven the Humvee before? No, I haven't. And so we went down this list. So my credibility with him continued to drop because I wasn't that subject matter expert. But within a short month, I cleared obstacles that were preventing him and his team from being able to do what they were really skilled at doing. Things changed, right? Our relationship immediately changed. And he didn't report to me. I didn't have any direct authority over him. I just had to influence him and that team that, I could make a difference and I could help. And in another setting, I would say I recognize I was not the right person. I was not going to be able to help this team advance. And, I think I recognize I was not going to have that competency that they needed for the leader to overcome. And it was a very highly technical area. And so I think understanding that there may be those times too, and your influence without authority sometimes is to find that SME that they are going to need, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I was thinking about here is, what advice would we have for those leaders that feel like, okay, they want to get started in this, in building their influence, right? Is it a skill that can be built? Is it a personality thing? Is it a charisma thing? As oftentimes we've heard that, like, oh, you either are born a leader or, or you just aren't. So what are your thoughts in that area?
I got to stay true to what I learned in our last episode, Alex. I no longer give people advice, because as Christy Pretzinger on our previous episode told me, she's
that.
like, yeah. So I would tell you this though. What are the experiences that we have had that tell us that doing this really helped and doing this did not help? So from that perspective, I'd say finding something common to connect with that person, to be able to relate to them, right? I told the story in many episodes ago, I think it was season 1 of my Army days when I was an officer that had to rely on this civilian government employee to help me in something that I needed to get done. And the first time I visited them, I did not talk about anything but them and golf, because I found out that they were really into golf. I kind of like golf. I was interested in it. And so I said, hey, that'd be a really good common thing to share with them. And so the first thing I did when I showed up to their desk, I could tell, oh, here comes this guy. He's going to ask me, he's going to want something. And this person was very difficult to work with, according to other people. But I didn't even ask him for what I needed until, like, I want to say 2-3 meetings after. I only touched base and I asked him about golf. He was very passionate about golf. You could tell he loved it. And that was my way of just connecting with him and being able to relate with something that he really liked. And I think from a relationship building, if you can do that and find that one thing with people, sometimes it's talking about their family. Sometimes it's talking about their son that's in college, right? And how proud they are. Or maybe they're part of a group that does fun things, sport things, public service things. Who knows? There's a lot of different things people can do.
Influence is a skill that we can develop, right? It's not one of these things that, you either have or don't have. It's a absolutely learnable skill, but it takes practice. I think that is important for a new leader to hear, is one of these things that, with a little bit of self-awareness around what areas the leader wants to improve in, it can be learned and as a skill developed.
Yeah, well said, Alex. That I think to our listener audience, that is part of what they look for out of our conversations is, what can they do? What can they try next? And I think you nailed it. Starting next week on Monday, you can go out there and just try to find something new about somebody that you have to work with, and maybe that's been a difficult work relationship, or maybe it's just a new work relationship, right? Maybe it hasn't been difficult at all. Bringing those intentional soft skills to the table, listen, right? I think is the other one. Just really kind of understand where they're coming from. Those are great points. Any other ones, Lupe, you would recommend?
Ask questions. I know we touched on it, but just to, put a sharp point on it, ask questions versus tell people. If you're the telling type and you're telling people, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you really probably want to reconsider how to approach it. And not all the time, but by asking questions, then that provides you the opportunity to demonstrate that listening skill Alex is talking about. But if you're always giving direction, right, what are you going to listen to? People say, okay.
And although we're talking about for someone maybe new into a leadership role or a role where they have to influence without authority, one of the things that Alex and I had a chance to do was a conference a while back where, we presented on this topic, and we had an audience that was so interested that there wasn't enough room for everybody to sit. And they had actually, unfortunately, turned a couple folks away. But the one theme that as people came up afterwards and that they kept talking to us about was the fact that they hadn't really ever been told about this approach you can take, and their jobs all demanded that they had to influence without direct authority. And so there was just really a lot of good information we were able to share. A lot of it touched on in this podcast around building those relationships, your credibility, which is more than just competence. It's the consistency, the integrity to finish things, the initiative to step in and or to listen. And then, service. We talked about how important it is to, before you ask for something, give something, right? And what that can really do to those relationships as you're trying to help influence a area that is important. Alex, this has been great. Lupe, really enjoyed the opportunity here this morning to talk with you both. And Alex, to help me keep Lupe in check is always greatly appreciated. So thank you.
I got your back, Steve. You know this.
And he needs help. He cannot handle it. Come on, Steve.
I do.
But
no, this has been great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great. It's a great kickoff to our new format with the three of us. Alex As expected, you are already adding a lot of great context and perspective to the conversation. And of course, as Steve pointed out, you're helping him keep me in check. So good job with that.
A lot of work, Alex. I'm just going to tell you.
Don't scare her off, Steve. But anyways, for all our listeners, thanks for listening. We hope you're enjoying the new format. We're excited to continue to try and help just give a different perspective on things, or maybe a perspective that you've had in the past, but maybe it kind of went back in the memory banks. Regardless, we intend to try and add value to our listeners. So if you have any ideas, please reach out to us on Instagram, on Threads. You can contact us, and even also directly through messaging on our podcast website, which we use Buzzsprout for. Any of those avenues of reaching out to us. Until the next time, this is Lupe Munoz.
I'm Steve McKeon, and
I'm Alex Aranda.
And this is the Leadership Exchange. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.